I remember the lesson of appeasement came with a picture of Neville Chamberlain yawning. Tired old statesman when faced with a dictator who meant to unleash World War II. I don't think it's a good idea to be tired at a critical moment, but the question of dissonance towards the world powers because of the way they went along with what Gail Burstyn is and her policy is tiring. There can be no mistaking that it needs to be investigated. It should have been arrested. It should have been prosecuted. The UN should not have stood for it. Vladimir Putin should not have stood for it. The United States of America should not have stood for it. And media should not have stood for it. And I know that one of the reasons why was because the storyline was being cheered on by the Beatles. The evidence I found shows that they created the storyline for that purpose. They will say that they didn't, that they intercepted it and cheered it because they felt it was in character about me. When it comes to professional investigation, I have very little doubt that there are professionals in Russia under Putin who would investigate if they were charged to do so. There was a man named Geisler, Erhard Geisler, I believe his name was. He was a Russian who felt that AIDS most likely originated in Fort Detrick. There are other people who've come to conclusions that are similar to that regarding areas that should be put under investigation in deterrence towards those things. I happen to know that the Seoul collapse was involved from my research, but the people who tortured me were being egged on by maybe Vladimir Putin, certainly Oliver Stone, definitely Cyril Wecht, and they were all protecting Gail Burstyn. Even Martha Gellhorn was careful about what she said because she saw it as an outgrowth of the Israelis. They came up with this story, a baddie story from the Twilight Zone, that Robert Fripp's Ministry of Intelligence hard sold. Now you come on to the situation as it is like a spoiler because there's friction. Friction has to be mended by diplomacy, right? And so the diplomacy has to put aside an issue like that because it's too divisive. Well, it doesn't really exist. There's no people determined to investigate. When it comes to Cersei Kennedy, I know of absolutely no evidence, absolutely none, zero, that implicates Russia. I don't see any evidence for it. I do see evidence that it was organized. So having these strange networks of fall guyism, like people were warded off from looking at Oswald's Russian intelligence files because it was set up to serve the CIA, and the people who loved JFK didn't like that arrangement. But let's not be dishonest. There does seem to be elements of Russian intelligence involved. And when we say rogue elements, as Jeffrey Sachs says about the CIA or the KGB or both, I think we're making a mistake in that it was Axis intelligence. And there was an Axis Russian non-aggression pact at one point. The conventional storyline is that America recruited Nazis to turn on Russia. And that's true. And it's absolutely abominable. Russia has enough control over their affairs that they have been better at honoring treaties. They have been more dependable and more professional than America, who just tears treaties up with every change of government. We don't seem to think that it's a matter of national legacy to honor treaties. So we need to have freedom to discuss matters intelligently so that people are not just convinced that the easy thing to do is to shoot down people who think differently. And it gets very scary when you have people in power who use the tendency for people to be mindless about these issues as a convenience to feed that mindlessness so that they have power. I agree with Jordan Peterson that influence is important if the reason that you have influence is because you're reaching people to be independent-minded and thinking clearly, whereas power is just a form of greed. I think that the pieces are in place for America and Russia to mend fences without perpetuating a dishonorable set of illusions about what happened when the Green Party and Yoko Ono struck on behalf of the Axis, supposedly to save the world by reducing overcrowding with these abhorrent means. And they claim that it was moral because they were teaching the victims a lesson in restraint by Burnham teaches. It's all the usual sniveling of the traditionalists about other people's sex. I don't go into it. People said things about me that were crude because they were lewd in manufacturing. I've been alone longer than I was a lover. No, I've been alone over 30 years, it seems like. Yeah, it's been over 30 years. And I don't go out pushing for relationships. I'm too disappointed in my fellow man. But the bottom line is trying to dislocate me is absurd. It seems that most of the people who were responsible for this nightmare did pretty well just ignoring me. And if they choose not to ignore me, then the issue is professional detective historians. You know, and there's ways that you can get on the right side of history. I'll give you an example when it comes to Russia. There's a beautiful movie called House of Fools, which manages, without running down Russian social institutions, mental health institutions, physicians, military figures, all play a role in that movie. It manages to convey the deeply held belief that war is folly. And it's a beginning to say that it's an issue of folly to have ignored and played a foolish UN dating game special with all of these prima donnas puffing themselves up as the benighted black man who was wronged and so on, over a drama club one-night stand that was concocted by museum thieves. It's demeaning to go along with such a storyline. So people have to have the courage to be respectable and professional about the issues that are tasking in police work. And international police work requires cooperation of the United Nations Security Council, Interpol, the International Criminal Court, and the people who are steerspeople for the opinions digest, and they should behave responsibly about it. But you can't ask me to back off from the evidence. You know, I'm not the type of person who burns books or burns testimony or shreds paper or anything like that. I mean, I was subject to dangerous tendencies when it comes to journalistic retaliation by power against journalism. I was tortured. I have Parkinson's disease. I'm deaf. My children, I never was allowed to have offspring. If it's dangerous to allow people to learn about me, that's not my doing. And they've gone crazy with the idea that the thing is worth money. And they want me to be a poach willingly. And I'm not willing to do that. I mean, I see the odds are 98% in favor of my being robbed of my entire life and my rights by criminals. But to say I should give the sanction of the victim, as Ayn Rand put it, or go along with it as good conduct by idealists, you bring back my father. Let me have my life with my best friend Jeannie. Turn back the clock. I mean, all of that is idiocy. It's hard to ignore it. Martha Gellhorn advised me to ignore evil idiocy because there's so much of it. Why get bogged down in it? But it's really very in your face in Seattle. You know, I'm sure that there's a lot of questions about who knew what was going on and why they did it and who supports it. And I don't see any reason to mend fences about it. I mean, I stand by the standards of the American Library Association. When it comes to Russia, I have good faith in the Russians. I don't particularly like the Russian Orthodox Church. I think it's a little bit extreme. It reminds me of the fundamentalists like Robert Bork. I'm not in tune with that stuff. It's not because I'm an outrageous libertine. It's because I'm a romantic arts poet. You know, I don't see any way that the human race can avoid having poets, romantics. I mean, there's a surprising number of very romantic Russian people in the world. Putin seems to have even been criticized for being one at times. So my advice, I guess, if I put it to you that way, is that if you don't want to deal with the issue that I raised as a Falk Medical Library clerk in 1984, but you do want to mend fences with Russia, then I suggest you read their intellectuals. Mikhail Bakhtin is a good place to begin. Study the truth about the situation that surrounded them from World War II onward. Look at their efforts at internal reform and the way that those things were targeted for sabotage by the United States. And engage in some self-reflective review. Because not everything that was done by the Red Scare sci-fi people was all that great. You know, I think we've wasted a lot of money, tax and spend militarism rather than going the direction of knowledge and echo schools. Jordan Peterson says we need the adventure. I say there is an adventure. It's sustainability. The Sustainable Development Goals is an adventure. If you want my advice, if you don't want to deal with the professional issues of studying evidence and trying to figure out what went on, go the direction of the adventure that's at hand. The Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. I mean, there's a lot of good things that can be done besides trying to investigate Gail Burstyn and how they pulled it off. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to go that direction and put it off. I mean, it's really not my precinct. You should keep in mind that whoever did it put my name on it. No. I don't agree to that. No. Don't put my name on something like that. No.